They called me the mother of all elephants. The women of Lianshuli village thought this was fitting since I had no children of my own, and I protected the elephants' food and defended their land. These local women loved to tease me, sometimes out of malice, sometimes as a compliment, and sometimes out of pure wonder at the world of the white man and his magic. When it came to elephants, however, the women had only anger. Why would I care about how much nourishment the elephants were getting from these women's mealy fields unless these animals were my own? Naturally, all elephants must have been my children. It was the only logical explanation. This excerpt comes from page 97, the first paragraph of the chapter, The Mother of All Elephants, which is chapter 7 in today's book, The Elephant's Secret Sense. The subtitle, The Hidden Life of the Wild Herds of Africa, written by Caitlin O'Connell. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. As I just showed, today's book is The Elephant's Secret Sense. I paid for this for $6, and given the handwriting and the minimal markings on it, I'm willing to bet that I bought it at Reston Used Books in Reston, Virginia. The back cover has a really interesting description of the main research being done in this book. While observing a group of elephants in the wild, Caitlin O'Connell, a young field scientist, saw the matriarch suddenly turn, flatten her ears, and lift a leg off the ground. Several others followed suit, and soon another elephant appeared. Could elephants feel vibrations through the ground, literally listening with their feet? O'Connell's groundbreaking discovery and determination to study and preserve these beautiful creatures would result in a 14-year struggle against a country in upheaval, tribal disputes, inhuman poachers, and a fundamentally ineffective approach to wildlife conservation. This book was published in 2007, and this is first published in trade paperback 2009. Interestingly enough, there is some testimonial here within the cover that says, "This book is far more than just this marvelous discovery and its role in the social lives of elephants. O'Connell also tells hauntingly of having to navigate the increasing conflict between the world of wild elephants and the world of humans trying to eke out survival from the soils of Africa, and how both sides lose in the process. This is a deeply engaging book." That testimonial was written by Robert Sapolsky, PhD, professor of biology and neurology, Stanford University, and author of A Primate's Memoir, Monkey Love, and Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. If that is a name that is familiar to you, both the title of a book and the name of the author, that is because A Primate's Memoir was covered on this channel a while ago. This book is primarily about Caitlin O'Connell's research into elephants in Africa during the early 2000s and 1990s. She says she first came to Etosha National Park in 1992, contracted by the Namibian Ministry of Environment and Tourism to study elephant movements, demography, ecology, behavior, and interactions with humans. It was during these off-seasons of my initial 3-year contract that I was able to spend countless hours by myself watching elephants at Mushara Waterhole. I spent most of my time in the Hide, a 10-foot square cement bunker 33 feet from the water, with about 7 feet of its height buried in the ground and a pillbox slit facing the waterhole. It afforded a splendid view of elephants at close range, but was very limited in terms of an overall picture of the negotiations made around the perimeter as to which herd was going to enter the clearing and when. But it allowed me to be closer to the action, and it was safe from lions and even a curious bull wanting to investigate the back of the truck. Once inside, however, I was committed for the night. It was me and my empty peanut butter jar, a makeshift but highly valued chamber pot in the bush. The isolation allowed me to reflect on the elephant's natural rhythms and to notice many behavioral patterns that had never been previously documented. These patterns formed the basis of my thinking for the next 15 years of my career as a scientist. Eventually, once I learned to slow my own sense of time, adapting it to the deliberate, meditative pace of an elephant, I started to understand the patterns I had been observing. Occasionally, Broken Ear would turn herself in a particular direction and freeze, sometimes with ears flat against her head and sometimes with ears held out, looking like a satellite dish scanning the horizon. As she scanned, she seemed to cue the other adults to follow her lead. When she alerted the others to pay attention, they all oriented in the same direction, froze again, sometimes with ears flat, leaning forward, one front foot propped up on the toenails. I scanned the horizon and saw a large bull heading in on the Southwest Elephant Trail about a half-mile away, ears fanning as he lumbered along. The vigilant cows shifted positions, several of them facing in the direction of the incoming bull, but their ears were not outstretched in a listening position. Could they have sensed his approach through the ground? I became very familiar with this particular way that elephants seemed to be listening with their feet. My curiosity grew as I watched an elephant assume a position with its ears flat against its head, usually accompanied by leaning with a foot lift or toenail contact. That's in the first few pages of the book, and that really shows what kind of questions she was leaning in on for her research. The rest of the book focuses on the various visits she has to that region and to the studies that she was doing, but also to the population studies and naming some of the elephants in the different herds that she encountered at that watering hole, as well as some of the bulls and some of the younger ones as well. It was a fun book to read. It's about 200 pages of content, and like I said, it's really engaging, it's really fun, and it really teaches you about those elephants through her as she describes her learning about those elephants. But there's also a human conflict side of things. Like I said in that intro, she does end up playfully teased by and to some degree hated by the local women because the elephants come in and they eat the maize and the other food that is being grown by those local women. So there is a degree of passion for the region, passion for the locals, and passion for the animals. And that is very similar, to be honest. It feels very similar to A Primate's Memoir, how the author of that one was invited to like various hangouts, I guess, with the locals who would then be drinking cow's blood, or he was invested in the primates, the baboons he was researching, and how the various baboons interacted with each other. They came and went where they were going for the lazy food, which troops of baboons were going to the dump to find food as opposed to finding food on the plains. It's a very similar book to that, and really that's probably why that author felt the need to write this testimonial, say it's engaging, and to tell in a small paragraph how in such detail it is a useful book, because he wrote a book very similar to it, but about 10-15 years earlier. Sapolsky's book came out in 2001, and his work was in the 80s and 90s. So not the 90s and 2000s like O'Connell, and they were probably contemporary, but not necessarily in communication with each other. To add to the research, she writes on page 184, elephants have two possible pathways to detect vibrations, either through bone-conducted hearing or through a sensory pathway not connected to the ear, and sometimes both. When vibrations travel through bone, they move through the feet, then the legs, shoulders, and finally into the middle ear cavity. Elephants have 3 middle ear bones that are enlarged. One, the malleus, is especially enlarged. The additional mass of this bone facilitates the independent oscillations of the middle ear bones relative to the skull due to inertia. The process is equivalent to movements caused by sounds entering the ear canal, hitting the eardrum and stimulating these bones directly. Bone conduction, in effect, skips the eardrum step. A simple example of this effect can be demonstrated by wearing earplugs. Your own voice will still sound fairly loud because you are hearing it through bone conduction. In addition to the enlarged ear bones, the dense fat in the foot pad may also facilitate a bone-conducted pathway. And a third feature is the use of a skeletal muscle in the ear, what Byron, our field geophysicist, had termed ear lips. But conduction is not the only way that animals detect vibrations. There is another pathway through specialized sensory cells throughout the body rather than via the ear. In primates, there are 3 different vibration-detecting cells found in the lips, hands, feet, and muscle lining the intestine. Each is capable of a range of detection. These same receptors can be found on the tip of the Asian elephant's trunk and are thought to be as sensitive as the lips on a primate. In fact, many small and large mammals are equipped to detect seismic cues this way. One notable example is the star-nosed mole, whose snout is surrounded by fleshy appendages covered with thousands of organs that act like a tactile eye. But specialized vibration-sensitive cells have also been found in the paws and knees of cats, in the knees of kangaroos, and in the beak, skin, and knees of birds to help them find prey and avoid predators. To investigate just where specialized cells are located in an elephant's foot, my colleague in Berlin, Thomas Hildebrandt, kept an eye out for elephants that died in captivity. Eventually, he was able to secure 2 specimens from the Berlin Zoo, an Asian elephant and an African elephant. Although his facility could accommodate very large animals, manipulating a whole frozen elephant was quite a feat. The weight of an adult head alone required handling with a grappling hook before we could isolate the areas of interest, mainly the ear and the sphincter-like muscle at the opening of the canal. And so she begins to describe that she did these anatomical studies while also gearing up her research team to return to Namibia to continue seismic playback studies to determine whether elephants could discriminate between seismic cues. What she really discusses is discovering that both the weight of an elephant as it plods along on the ground sends shockwaves through the ground that can be detected by other elephants. But also, elephants are capable of really, really low-pitched sound that cannot be heard by humans, but can be heard by other elephants. And this trumpeting at such low pitch that humans can't hear it can be picked up by those elephants, and that was partially what she was hearing. And so between hearing those distant elephants through rumbling as well as through seismic effects from just their walking around, they are able to detect each other from large distances in ways that humans can't really have figured out before certain technology, or through folkloric understanding of how they worked. And really, a lot of science does touch upon how indigenous peoples understand animals to work in their area. It's not enough to know that they work a specific way, but the mechanics of how that system within an animal works. And so that's what this book is concerned with, is discovering that secret sense, that ability to detect movement through their toes, through their bones, and through their ears. One last note, and this was mostly just a side note to anything else. There was a particularly funny note to me in that groups of male elephants, not that they really grouped up often, but their interactions between bulls of different ages were referred to as a gentleman's club in this book, that she had a hard time really catching all of those interactions, and that idea that animals are called like a gentleman's club was just really funny to me. I sometimes wish that like elk would be called like bachelor parties or frat bros, fraternities, when you see herds of bull elk just relaxing in the summer together before they're really competing with each other for cow elk. And there's other groups where, it could be called a fraternity, where these bros are just hanging out and eating and then eventually compete for their female companions. But oftentimes they're not called such comedic group names. But yeah, I really liked this book. I read it back in 2019 during that summer I was working at that summer camp. And I was able to read it relatively quickly, just reading it on the porch as the sun rose before everyone else started doing their things and I needed to help out. So, this is a good book. If you have the time to read it, definitely pick it up. It's only, like I said, 220 ish pages long, but it's really fun and she writes in a fascinatingly engaging way. It's definitely up your alley if you like nature writing and if you like reading about mammals and intelligent animals. So, yeah, this is a good book and I recommend you read it. My name is Wild Stag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.